As the war in Ukraine continues to rage, Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Moscow for a two-day visit, meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to reports, the Chinese president and his Russian counterpart held discussions on China's peace proposal for Ukraine. Xi aims to flex China's diplomatic strength after consolidating his power by securing a third term as president. However, experts suggest this meeting comes ahead of Putin's fresh offensive in Ukraine to secure his military holdings as NATO continues to arm the Ukrainian forces. Reports suggest Putin aims to send a message to the world that he has not been isolated. Remember, this also comes after he was indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Ukraine, while the United States has announced a new military assistance package for the war-torn nation. Meanwhile, in a counter-diplomacy move, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is in Ukraine to show solidarity with Zelensky. What we are seeing is Cold War era lines being drawn across the global world order. As Putin grapples for international support, is the meeting with Xi pure optics or the emergence of an anti-NATO axis? Will the two-day summit in Moscow see a push for peace or an escalation of the conflict? With India's allies on both sides of the divide, how does the Modi government navigate this diplomatic tightrope? Dr. Nagao, fellow at Hudson Institute, is joining me from Tokyo. We have Tatiana, Russian journalist from Moscow. Valentyn is a Ukrainian MP from Kyiv. And Aina Tanjung, political affairs commentator from Beijing. Dr. Nagao, I'm going to begin with you. The dual visits by Kishida and Xi underscore deep divisions in Northeast Asia towards the war in Ukraine, with Japan pledging, substantial aid for Kyiv. So most countries in the world have chosen sides. Then the question is, did Xi's visit then to Moscow prompt Kishida's visit to Kyiv? Because that came as a surprise.
Of course, two visits are planned separately, but as background situation, two countries are sharing the same background situation. For example, Kishida's visit to Ukraine has three purposes. Firstly, China's growing influence toward Russia, and Japan need to deal with Russia and China and North Korea at the same time. That is the reason Japan strengthens the cooperation with other allies and partners. And secondly, Japan will be the presidency of G7 in the wartime. So Russia's aggression to Ukraine is a big challenge for the next G7. Japan need to lead. In this case, if Japan keeps pacifism, Japan cannot show the leadership. Japan should be the normal. In this case, Japan need to show the courage to go to Kyiv, even if the Kyiv is under attack of the other country. And thirdly, indeed, this operation is a joint operation, cooperation with India, Poland, and Ukraine. That's what it has done. So this means that such kind of the cooperation itself is the purpose to strengthen the cooperation with other countries. So this was the first experience for Japan after the World War II. So that is the reason, these three reasons, the background is the same. Okay. With China's visit to Russia. So that's why the other background is the same.
There, I mean, that should be highlighted, that Japan is hosting, in fact, it has the presidency of G7, and hence that visit of Kishida becomes important. Aina Tanjung joining us from Beijing. With Beijing's visible slant towards Moscow, what makes Xi confident that Zelensky will accept the peace plan for Ukraine?
Well, there is no peace plan. What China is doing is trying to set the table so that there can actually be a meeting. China's diplomatic push is not towards pushing its own agenda. It's really about trying to get these two sides to come to an agreement. Let us say that we're all clear that a military solution is not going to be acceptable on one side. If Russia were to completely win, it would be faced with very hostile local people that would drain its resources and make it a daily target of Western media. If Ukraine were to win, it would threaten perhaps a nuclear retaliation, at which point we're facing Armageddon. So at this juncture, diplomacy is the only rational process. But the U.S. is not
Putin
pushing it.
And Xi
China is.
Have referred to each other rather warmly in this trip, calling each other dear friend. So if the side has been chosen by China, then this peace plan or an option of bringing the two sides on table doesn't really hold.
Well, I think you're correct. I mean, saying somebody's a dear friend is important to earn trust. What we have today is a trust deficit. The fact is that the Europeans, Hollande and Merkel, both admitted that they had no intention of following through on the Minsk 1 and 2 peace plans that they signed on to. So the question is, how do you regain trust? I don't think you regain trust by calling somebody an enemy. That's what the U.S. is doing. China is trying to get all sides together. It has been neutral in this. It is not supplying Russia with armaments the way that the U.S. and Europe is. They're simply pointing to the fact that this is a situation that has to be settled diplomatically. And it would be better if it's done before more lives are lost. I don't know how anyone could argue with that.
Dr. Nagao, what are your thoughts on this? Because if you look at the plan which was put out by one of the news websites, they are also saying that you're stopping unilateral sanctions. And these sanctions have come from NATO countries and also from the West against Russia.
NATO react the Russia's invasion, I think. So Russia invade Ukraine. That was the first move. After that, NATO tried to react. So that's why Japan's stance is very clear. We stand with Ukraine. Russia was wrong and NATO is not wrong. So view from Japan, that is very clear. So if Russia say, or if China say, the sanction against Russia is wrong, Japan think you are wrong. That is our stance, very clear.
But Japan has also pledged $5.5 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine. So Japan has also chosen its side just as China has.
Of course, humanitarian assistance is very important, and Japan supports refugees of the Ukraine. But at the same time, because we stand with Ukraine and we think the Ukraine is a victim, that's why we must support Ukraine refugee, Ukraine country, and even if the armed forces, we will support it because we stand with Ukraine. It is very clear because we respect rule-based order and Russia violates.
Yes, so are you saying, and are you in agreement with what the US and most of Europe feels, that the Chinese leader's presence in Moscow is in fact a ringing endorsement for Putin at a time when his military is running out of supplies and Russia's economy is struggling under Western sanctions?
I think China tried to China tried to supply the weapon to Russia, and there are some evidences we have already found. For example, some ammunition Russian army are using in the Ukraine is made in China, or for the hunting purpose, the China have already exported assault rifles for infantry of Russia. So in this case, if there is arms export or arms donation, arms supply, China has already done, and the NATO side already done to support Ukraine. So in this case, if the China say the NATO side should take the responsibility, view from Japan, NATO side is not wrong. NATO side try to defend the victims.
Aina Tanjung, you know, what is increasingly becoming clear is that China perhaps is a lone voice supporting, increasingly isolated Putin here. And he's become a global pariah in many ways. And China is the only one. And let's not forget that this is 9th visit of Xi ever since he took charge.
Yes, but it's not a ringing endorsement. China was taken by surprise by the action in Ukraine. They have principles that say non-interference in other countries. They're not happy with that. But on the other hand, this stuff about Ukraine as a victim, I agree with that. But the victimization was done by the U.S. and Europe by pushing into those areas. I mean, Kissinger, great statesman of the U.S. said if you go into Ukraine, if you push NATO in or the EU, you will have conflict with Russia. The same thing was said by President Biden and also by the current head of the CIA, Casey. So at this juncture, if you know something's going to happen and you do it, I think you're responsible. So, China is simply trying to bring peace. And it is, of course, earning the ire of the United States, which doesn't want to see peace. It's benefiting. Russia is weakened. Europe is weakened.
Okay. We also have Valentyn joining me from Kyiv. Valentyn, how is this visit being seen?
As from Kyiv, from the Ukrainian parliament, I can tell you that for us, for a country is defending from Russian aggression, is very important that China would never and by no means help Russia to conduct this aggressive war and killing our people. That's the main thing and target what we here in Ukraine understand is up to date. Plus, we would like, by all international community efforts, not to let Russia use China and North Korea for military supply for Russian army of aggression.
Okay, then how is this peace plan of Beijing acceptable? Will there be a rethink, some kind of consideration by Zelensky? Will he give us some thought to it?
We would like to at least make as much efforts as we can and could. And as you know, today in Kyiv we received the Prime Minister of Japan. Before that, many other leaders of Big Seven. We would like that U.S.-led and international-led coalition against Russian aggression would strengthen, not to split apart.
Would you have wanted Xi to perhaps visit Kyiv as well? Was there a sense that was there an anticipation?
Yeah, we understand the leader of China is a busy person. This is his first visit for 4 years, I think, even to Moscow. We would like to first establish contact between our Ukrainian president and Mr. Xi. And I think that would be the first and very important step for China, such big country, to better understand what is happening and what we are fighting for in Ukraine, for our sovereignty, for our independence, for our people.
So, but can Beijing's peacemaking project be taken seriously by Kyiv? Will Zelensky be even giving it a thought?
I don't think we here in Ukraine can be much, let's say, involved in such process and or projects. But as a peace plan, we clearly, with the most countries in the United Nations and around the world, we clearly understand that Russia should stop its aggression, withdraw all the occupational forces from Ukraine, and this is the true and the only way towards peace.
Okay, Roxolana, 2 visits, 2 leaders, both being watched very closely by the 2 sides. The question is that Xi perhaps is hoping that he has gone with a peace project for Ukraine that may not be acceptable to Ukraine. Then why is Putin hopeful that Xi could play that role?
I think that the most important thing, the most important part of this scenario is to start that narrative, to make the first step. And if the diplomatic issue has emerged and has been placed on the discussion table, I think it's an important move forward. And it's, it can be considered as a considerate move for all the parties, as well as for Moscow and for Kyiv and Beijing. And I have heard a comment of my colleague, I guess he was from the United States, who has mentioned the concern of the West, and he has mentioned the position of Henry Kissinger in consideration to Ukrainian crisis. I think that's important to check up the roadmaps, the watches of all the sides, and to understand that the world has reached a crucial point of the turbulence, and all the parties have to cool down and to stop, to make a few steps backward in order to readjust the situation, to cool it down. That's why the significant part of it is to start a discussion. We're not discussing either this plan is relevant, reliable, or non-reliable. It's important that this discussion is on the table. So it has started. It's a good sign.
You're calling it a good sign, but the question is, the Ukrainian MP here, Valentyn, is certainly hopeful. They were of the opinion that she would visit Kyiv as well, will pay a visit to Ukraine. That did not happen. So, if anything, she seems to have chosen a side.
I don't think so. To my point of view, if Mr. Xi would have taken that step, the soil is still too fragile. It's the wound is still quite opened. I would take it as a next phase. A discussion with Kyiv to combine the things at the same very moment that will actually not make the parties closer to the desired outcome at this very moment.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagao, Valentyn, Aina Tanjung, and Roxana for their thoughts. And of course, 2 visits that are being watched by the world very closely. Lots more news and updates on the other side. Stay with us.